All right, good afternoon. I'll get us started. My name is Terry Scott. I want to talk about effective instruction for the time we have this afternoon. I study kids with challenging behaviors, and the thing that I'm really interested in, or the things I'm really interested in, are those things we can do to maximize the probability of kids' success. So I always look at this like if you're a teacher, if you're an educator, you work with kids, you're gambling because you're trying to find that thing that offers the highest possible probability for success. Not all the things that we have out there at our disposal are equally effective. In fact, even among all the things that we would say were research-based, some of those things have higher probabilities for success than others. I want to specifically dig into instruction in our time together. And I want to think about if you were betting your own money and we were going to teach some kids some things, and it really doesn't matter what we're teaching them, reading or math or language or science or behavior. If you were betting your own money on the probability of those kids being able to understand it and use it without us, there would be probabilities going through your mind. What would I like to see that teacher do? So I'm going to talk about this as a science of instruction. And I'm going to do it kind of in this way. I want to lead you through a logic first. Why would we think about doing it this way? I'm going to show you some things. And then I'm going to end with, here's the data. I always feel like it's better to introduce things to people with logic and then the data. The data, I don't think, is likely to make people change. But if we can give them a logic and then use the data to back that up, I think we can. So I'm going to talk about three things that make up effective instruction. If you were trying to maximize the probability of success with whatever you're teaching, we'd want to have these three things there. This is the science of instruction. Number one, and we're going to unpack each of these things. Number one, explicit instruction. Explicit instruction could also be considered as teacher clarity, or do the kids understand what we're doing and why we're doing it? So I'm going to say it. I'm going to model it. I've got to think about how I connect this to where we've been, remember what we were doing last week, and where we're going. And I'm going to say, how do you think your parents would use this skill at their house? And I'm going to go out and find examples that are real for you. Unfortunately, a lot of times, the examples that are in our books don't look a lot like what our kids are actually going to confront in the real world. So we're going to do a whole lot of thinking about how clear can we make this. We'll unpack that. Second, it needs to be engaging. While I'm making it clear, you need to be doing things with me. If it's just me talking and you sitting and listening, it'll fairly quickly fade out. So I've got to keep you engaged. So we need to talk about what's the teacher's job, what's the teacher's responsibility in terms of keeping the kids with us. And finally, we need to give kids lots of chances to practice. And we need to be there to give them feedback on their performance. And critically, they need to be successful more often than they're not. If that doesn't happen, we're giving them feedback, but they're not being successful very often. What that means is number one and number two need to be rethought by us. More time, more intensity, differentiation, something. How much is enough? For the average kid, we believe if you create an instruction where they can get it right 4 times more often than they get it wrong, we can predict good things moving forward. But if you're talking about kids with a history of failure with one of these skills, that becomes more like 14 to 1. And when we're talking about kids with a long history, that can be really high. But whatever it is, we've got to create the instruction to get that level. So let's start with explicit instruction. If I'm thinking about being explicit, I'm going to start off by telling you exactly what it is we're talking about today. Now, I remember being a student and saying, "Why are we doing this?" And the teacher would say often, "Because I said so." That's not a very compelling reason for me to want to follow you on this lesson. Neither is because it's in the book, because the principal said so, because that's what your parents are paying me for. None of those make kids think I should follow along here. So we have to start with a compelling reason. Why should you care? You've got to create a context, make it real for their lives. A whole lot of what we call culturally responsive practices fall in right here. Are you talking about these things in such a way that the kids who you are teaching are thinking, I understand why this would be important for me? And it's hard sometimes to do that. But we've got to find a way to make that case to kids. Second, what examples are you going to use? And I'm going to do some little activities with you here in just a minute to show that it's very important what examples you select and how you promote them and present them. It can't just be a range of random things. It needs to be very thoughtful. So I'm going to think about, what do you need to get it? So here's an example. These are things that we might teach. The sign on the left and the sign on the right I found on the internet. I don't know where they're from. We can all agree they're ridiculous. The sign in the middle I found in a school, and I took a picture of it. I would argue that the sign in the middle is just as ridiculous as the sign on the left and the sign on the right. None of them teach you what to do. None of them give you a rationale for doing something. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible that there's a kid in your school who would not know that hitting was okay, but it's pretty unlikely. So we've got the rule, the kids know it, why do they still hit? Two reasons. One, it works. Punch someone in the mouth, they shut up. Two, I don't know what to do instead. What would you like me to do? So what we end up doing is we say, treat other people the way you'd like them to treat you. We're going to call that respect others. Okay? That makes sense? But you'll still have kids making errors. And I would say 90% of the time when I say to a kid who has hit, kicked, or pushed someone else, why? And they will say, they did it to me first. There's an example that needs to be taught. How do you respect others when they're not respecting you? Because that example is the one we all know is where this is going to break down. Part of what we need to be thinking about when we develop our explicit instruction is, what examples do I need to teach these kids? Part of it is, what's going on in their world, and another part is, where will this break down? If I had to bet where this was not going to work, what would that be? And that needs to be a place where I pull a lot of examples. So this is from a real set of studies done by Rob Horner and his colleagues, like back in the 70s and early 80s. But in general, what happened on this set of studies was they decided, we're going to teach a group of kids with severe intellectual disabilities how to cross streets. So the first thing they do is you walk around the university and say, what do streets look like when you want to cross them? And this is what they came up with as what kids needed to know. These are all a little bit different, but we can show on each one what walk and don't walk means. Okay? So then they practiced with kids by going directly to these places and asking, should you walk? Should you walk? Should you walk? And the kids were very successful. So now it's time for generalization. Where would you like to go? And the kid says, I want to go to this place. So they go to that place, but here's what they found. A lot of the places where the kids wanted to go did not have stoplights. All we taught was stoplights. We need to go back and realize the world our kids live in is bigger than stoplights. And then they realized the world our kids live in doesn't even have stop signs all the time. So they went back and taught all these things. There was still one thing that messed it up. They found that no matter how they taught this, if other people crossed when it said don't move, go, the kids went too. And they had to go back and teach the kids. This is really important. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. You have to focus on what we're talking about doing. This is a great example of the way we should be selecting examples. Are we selecting examples across all the things our kids are going to need to know? Are we showing them how minimally different things would not be what we're talking about? And are we thinking ahead? What would mess this up? And making sure we teach those examples. So I want to do this with you. So I've done this for years now, talking about the logic of explicit instruction. And there have been times when people have disagreed with me. More than once, someone has said to me, it's not good to explicitly tell kids what we're teaching. They should have to figure that out on their own. And I would say something like, well, why? And they would always say, it's better. I can never understand what they mean by better because they can't tell me. And there's no evidence to suggest that. But it's gone so far as I had someone tell me one time that if you tell kids what we're doing, it's disrespectful to the kids. It's insulting because they need to get it on their own. My concern is that as a person who works in special education, there are a lot of kids that won't. But that's not you. You're all bright, college-educated people. So what I've decided to do is do some discovery instruction with you. The name of this class that you're in right now is called Colorful Geometry. I am the teacher. And what you need to know is the skill that's super important in colorful geometry that we call OSH. Now, I'm not going to tell you what OSH is because I don't want to insult you. I don't want to be disrespectful. But again, I'm not worried about it because what I've got here is a room filled with bright, college-educated professionals that are at a conference to learn. So this will be simple. So you can look at that first thing and start theorizing. I think OSH is a green triangle. No, I think OSH is a triangle. It doesn't have to be green, but it needs to be on top of some sort of a rectangle. And someone else could say, I don't think triangles are relevant at all. I think it's just blue rectangle, and you have a lot of possibilities. I'm not telling you anymore, but let's do this. Let's go walk around. And so we go out and look, there's another one. Randomly occurred in nature. It's authentic. What did you learn? I don't know if the triangle is important. If it is, it doesn't have to be on the blue. Nothing else, I don't know. It doesn't teach very much. Good teaching examples teach something with everyone. That's not a very good teaching example. This one is a worthless teaching example. And it might be out there and it's real, it's an authentic example. It doesn't teach you anything. There's nothing you could say I know now that I didn't know before after looking at that. And the problem is, if I still don't know what OSH is and there's still examples coming up, I start to think, I'm not good at OSH. I don't like being in colorful geometry class. I wonder if I flipped Mr. Scott off if he let me leave. That's where we start headed. Failure predicts kids' behaviors, and my instruction is predicting failure. So let me show you one that's not OSH. Okay. Every single thing you might have thought was OSH has changed, so you have no idea what was important. If I don't make clear what it was that had to change to make it not OSH, it is absolutely not helpful. So I'll end with this one. Now, let's practice. Anyone think this one's OSH? What's your name? Alan thinks this one's OSH. Good job, Alan. Yeah. Could you tell us how you knew that was OSH?
Because it matched the second example that was OSH.
Okay, what part of it makes it OSH?
The red outline and the green triangle on the outside.
I don't think you have any idea what it is, do you, Alan? All right. So here's the deal. When we're doing discovery instruction, and I give you a full battery of things to discover, if you don't discover it, that's on you, Alan. I've got 3 possibilities for him. 1, Alan wasn't paying attention while I taught. Probably ADHD. 2, Alan has some sort of a colorful geometry disability. So he's never going to pick this up just from me teaching it. Or 3, Alan has behavior disorders. And he does know what it is, but he's messing with me. But realize every one of those possibilities is that's your problem, not mine. If it's up to you to discover it, if you're not getting it, that's on you. I would rather look at this like when it's not working, the ball is back in my court as an educator, and I have to think, then what can I do to make it more likely that you're successful? And I want you to take the credit for that. In fact, this is my definition of being a teacher. Teachers, think out the right examples to give and the way to give them. And think out how to talk about them to kids. And they play little tricks and they set little traps and they set kids up to get it right. And when the kid gets it right, we give them the credit for it. Wow, you're really good at this, even though I'm the one that set that up. But when we're doing it this way, I'm done. He's just not ready to learn OSH yet, I might say. Let's do another one. Now, this one is clearly not OSH. But nobody was going to raise their hand anyway because I just beat Alan up. All right? The rest of you are going, 1, I don't care if it's OSH or not. He's making this up. Who cares? 2nd, why would I set myself up for this abuse? And that's what kids are thinking. I'm not going to engage in this. When I engage in this, there's a good chance I'm going to get it wrong. Just leave me out of this. And that's what I've created in here with all of you. Now, we could keep going, and I could keep asking, and I bet people might start to think different things. But I can tell you, because I've done this so many times, and many times I've asked people, write down what you think OSH is. And I've probably done this over 100 times. The best I ever had was 40%, which was amazing, because normally it's like 5%. But let's say it was always 40. That means 60% of you are failing. That's not effective instruction. My bet is that most of you could take a guess, but my bet is also that nobody in here is certain. So I want you to think about a logic here. The real world has every example you need for someone to be mastering what we're teaching. It's got them all. Problem is the real world is not an effective teacher by itself because it's random. And all the examples are there, but if you don't see them in the right order or you don't see the right ones, you'll start thinking you're not good at it. It'll confuse you and you won't like it. So that's why we need teachers. Teachers come in and they say, what examples do you need to see? And how do I need to talk about them so that you walk away going, duh, that's easy. I get that. That's my job, is to create that. So think about this. 2 weeks ago, a flying saucer landed in my backyard. An alien hopped out and we started having a conversation, and I say, why are you here? And he says, I've been sent from my planet to find out what a dog is on Earth. What's a definition of dog I should give him? I said 4 legs and fur. Turns out that describes a lot of things. So I don't have a definition for dog. I think genetically someone could define what dog is. But for me just to say, here's dog, I can't do it. So here's what I suggested. Let's do naturalistic instruction. For the next week, you, alien, and I are going to walk around the block at my house, through my neighborhood, and we're going to look for dogs. And every time I see a dog, I'm going to point it out and make sure you know that's a dog. But if it's a squirrel, that's not a dog. And if it's a cat, that's not a dog. And pretty much everything else that's not a dog, that's not a dog. But there are lots of dogs. So we'll get to point to lots of dogs. So we do this for a whole week, every day. But what if, randomly, all the dogs in my neighborhood are knee-high or bigger? Just randomly, that's the way it is. We say, okay, see you later. He goes back to his planet. They show him a picture of a chihuahua. Will he say dog or not dog? And it's not because we don't have the examples. It's because, as the teacher, it's my job to find the examples that make this clear. And what happens randomly that you might discover may or may not make it clear. That's our job. As adults in a classroom, our job is to maximize the probability that they get it. So let's do this again. Now, if I were using effective explicit instruction, I would start like this. Remember when we talked about this? This is just like it. Here's what this one means, and if we do this one well, we'll be able to go on and do these other things. How do you think your parents use that at home? And then I'm going to start giving you examples. Well, I want to show you something. I'm not going to do any words. And again, words are good. I should be talking to you. But I want to show you the power of teacher-selected examples for explicit instruction. You know that one. Here's another one. So the first one was a blue rectangle with a red outline and a green triangle in it. The second one is a red rectangle outline with orange inside. What do you know about triangles? They don't matter. All it took was one example to completely get rid of triangles. Now, there's really only one thing in common across those two, but with only two, it's hard to know if that's it, so you've got to see it a third time. Now, that's principle 1 of explicit instruction. Show a range of possibilities, but every one of them has that 1 or 2, whatever things it is that makes it meet that definition. Now what you do is you say, I'm going to show you one that's not. But when I show you what's not, I only change one thing. When I show positives, they have to be wildly different. When I show the negative, only one thing changes. It turned to a green rectangle. So here's another possibility that would not be OSH. It's red, but it's not a rectangle. So we've got rectangle, but green, not OSH. Circle, but red, not OSH. Rectangle and red, OSH. And I'm always going to end with a positive. Now, if we were to say, raise your hand if you think this one's OSH. Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous, Alan, but here I come. How'd you know this was OSH? I didn't tell you. What do you think it is? red rectangle is exactly the right answer. Nice job, Alan. You're really good at colorful geometry. You ought to be in my advanced placement class next year with this. All of the positives that Alan's getting right now, I'm giving to him because he got it right. Even though he's telling me I told him. I never told you what OSH was. You deduced that from the examples. Now, good, explicit instruction, I would have told you. But the examples I selected make that obvious, and that's a big part of explicit instruction. So I'm going to let you practice with me giving you feedback all the way along. Every day when you get done with this, you go do a project. And on the project today, I know you're going to see an OSH. Here's the weird thing, though. The OSH I noticed that you're going to see today on your project is weird. It's different than anything we've ever seen. And that's why I have to do this. Remember the street crossing? But what if other people are going? And you think, yeah, that's a weird one. We need to teach that. Or what if somebody's not respecting me? I should be able to be disrespectful to them. That's one we need to teach. Here's one we need to teach. Is a rectangle still a rectangle if it's rotated partway like this? What if it has weird stuff on the inside? Doesn't matter, because it's 4 90-degree angles is a rectangle and red. So today, if you were to see one of these, and this is just me pre-teaching something that I think might trip you up, probability. What could I do to maximize the probability that you'll be successful with whatever we're doing? Now, I'm not going to ask you to write down the answer, but my guess is that better than 90% of you would get the right answer if I asked you to. It's not 100% because there's nothing that's 100%. It's only a probability. And what's the probability I can create? How high can I get it? So there's 3 things we know about explicit instruction that have been taught to us by a guy named Siegfried Engelmann. 1, when you're teaching something to kids, think about the entire range of where it might be used and what it might be looking like. And select examples that sample that full range of all the possibilities. If you're doing street crossing, I think what that means is you need to go out and walk the entire community with kids so you can see all the possibilities. Second, show them non-examples, and a non-example should be one little feature away from a positive example, because that juxtaposition gets kids to absolutely understand discrimination between yes and no. And 3, specifically and directly teach the weird things, the odd things, the confusing things, and the exceptions to the rule. Now, if I'm doing all of that and doing it really well and talking while you're sitting, you're probably not listening. And I say this a lot to people, and if this is what you teach, I apologize. But if you teach the Industrial Revolution, nobody cares. And they're not going to. I'm not saying it's not important and you shouldn't teach it. What I'm saying is there is no way that the Industrial Revolution will be as interesting as social media, as boys or girls, as movies, as sports, as TV, as all these other things that are out there. The only way you're going to make this so that kids come is you've got to get their brain and bring it with you. They're not going to bring it for you. You got to go get it. So here's what I want. I'm talking about whatever it is I'm teaching. I want their brain to be massaging that content and thinking about it. What's that? How's that happen? Why would that be the case? I want their brain massaging it. Very, very quickly, those brains will go, social media. And they're going to go over this way. You've got competition for that brain. The only way we're going to beat social media is if we keep their brain busy with what we're doing. And what we want to do is we want their brain to massage our content, and they must do something physically right afterward. We call these opportunities to respond, or we shorten them to OTR, opportunity to respond. Anytime I make the student's brain massage anything I'm talking about content-wise and then respond. So I'll give you one. What does the O stand for in OTR? Say the word. Okay, so I made your brain think OTR, opportunity, and then you had to say it. That was physical. Saying it, writing it, raising your hand, making a signal, all of these count as ways to show that kids are engaged. So what I want to do is I want to maximize the opportunities for kids to be doing something. And if I just do, raise your hand, raise your hand, raise your hand, kids will just start doing this and they're not really thinking and doing. So I'm going to mix them up. I want a core response. Then I want cards. Raise your red card if you think this. Raise your green card if you think this. Turn to your neighbor and tell them one word you think best fits what we're doing. Write down the word you think best describes it and hold it up. Draw a picture of that. We can do this a million ways. Option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4. On your fingers, tell me which option you think is the right one. Every one of these is an OTR because it makes kids stop, think, and react. That physical part is super important because if all I say is, think about OTRs, you may or may not be thinking about OTRs. I'm guessing in the classroom, kids are not. But when you say, and do something, it stimulates a, gotta do it. That's where I'm going with it. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to keep you all with me as I go through the content. Now, I don't think you need OTRs, certainly not all day. And even when you're teaching, I don't think you need them the entire time. If I'm teaching and the kids are looking right at me and nodding their heads and they're really interested, you can tell, I don't need to do something to engage them. They're already engaged. That doesn't happen all that often, but it does sometimes. So I don't put these in my lesson plan. I think out ahead of the lesson, what could I use with response cards today? I could have them do this or this. What could I do with core respond today? And if we get to this part where it's not really going as engaging as I'd like, I pull out the OTRs. What the evidence says is, when you can provide opportunities to respond to kids during instruction at a rate of 3 per minute, we get statistically significant outcomes that are better, statistically increased, better active engagement, and statistically decreased disruptive behaviors. OTRs at 3 per minute. Now, I don't think I need 3 per minute during all of my instruction. There are times when I do and times when I don't. So I'm really going to think about these when what I'm teaching is really new to you, complex, confusing, or if you have deficits in this area, I need more OTRs to keep your brain with me. But I'm going to kind of look at you and see how it's going and figure out where I want to use those. So we know 3 per minute is where we get this effect. Here's data. So we've been collecting data for 17 or 18 years now. We no longer use a palm. We now have tablets. But that little tablet has on it a little code for every kind of a teacher behavior we can think of. We pick a kid at random. So if somebody's working for me doing observations, I would tell them, when you walk in the room, before you get in there, think of a kid. And they'll go, I'm going to go 3rd row, 2nd kid I see. See, 1, 2, 3, that's my kid. And that kid is who I watch. So after 20,000 observations, I can tell you, what does the average kid in a classroom do? What does the average teacher at different grade levels do? And the more interesting part is, how does what the teacher does affect what the kid does? So let's look at some of this data. This is data on OTRs. We say we'd like to see 3 or more per minute as an average. We're nowhere near that. Several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I went to one of our neighboring states, and they asked me to spend 20 minutes talking to about 400 brand new teachers at the start of the year, just graduated. I chose to spend my half hour talking about OTRs. At the end of that half hour, I asked this group of people that just graduated, how many of you had ever heard of OTRs before today? Not a single hand went up. I think that's problematic, that we've got something that is essential to engagement. And engagement is essential to effective instruction. And it's not hard to do, and we aren't even talking about it. I think that's highly problematic when you start thinking about probabilities for kids' success. Also, it goes down over time, as do most of the things we're going to see. So here's a quick little study to think about. This is high poverty schools in the state of Kentucky, of which there are a lot. High poverty schools we refer to as Title I. So I ask this question: how many Title I schools are there in the state that are at the highest level on the state's reading assessment? There were 12. 11 allowed us to come observe. I put my little team of observers in every single classroom in every one of those schools, and they watched and coded teachers teaching. Then I matched a sample of 11 high poverty, demographically similar, low reading score schools, and we sat in every classroom of every one of those schools and coded teacher and random kid. This is something called hierarchical linear modeling. Big idea, long story short. One thing was significant. Group OTR. Here's how big it was. If you're the average kid in a high achieving poverty school, during the average week, you get more than 260 extra chances to respond during instruction. There's the difference between high and low achieving poverty schools. It's a teacher behavior. Engagement is a teacher behavior. And it makes a huge difference. And we keep seeing these types of results. I'm going to show you some more here in just a second. But feedback. Now, I'm a behavior analyst, and I approach things with a very behavioral lens. And yet, if I say positive reinforcement, I get the feeling that everybody thinks I'm immediately talking about handing out tickets and candies. When I say we need to have a lot of feedback, I mean adults should use their words. That sign, another one I found on the internet, and I don't know where it's from. If someone said to me, what does positive feedback look like when you have a really effective classroom? I would say, like that. Hey, I saw you do that right. Good for you. I'm going to tell others. That's it. Tell them. Use your words. So we have this new puppy at home. And it's impressed upon me a lot of things, actually, but it's impressed upon me, one, how great it is to have language. Because when the puppy does something well, I can't go over and go, hey, you know, when you went out there and did that, that was the right thing. That doesn't work at all. We do have that ability with kids, and we're not using it. That's so important. Talk to them. Tell them what they're doing well. And they do a lot of things well. So it's really important that we are using our words to let kids know, because this is the data on how often we do that, and it's not as often as we think. At elementary school, the average teacher we've looked at in this set of studies says something, and we also count thumbs up. We also count gestures. Says or gestures something positive once every 6 to 7 minutes. By middle school, that's once every 13 to 14 minutes. And by high school, it's once every 23 minutes. Now, I've had people say, well, it should look like that because as kids get older, they're super successful. They don't need us to say something anymore. And I would absolutely agree with that if that red bar were going down. But because errors aren't going down, we're still saying you're doing it wrong at the same frequency we were. That doesn't make sense. It means the positives aren't high enough. And that's what we keep seeing over and over again. Now, I will make a distinction here between negative feedback and corrective feedback. Negative feedback, we teach our coders, is a stop command. Anything the teacher says that indicates what you're doing, you should stop. Even if it's sit down. Sit down means stop not sitting down. Knock it off. Don't. All of those are stop commands. And I want to think about the stop command compared to a correction. A correction would be this. What would be a more respectful way to say that? It's a question that's instructional that puts it back on the student to correct themselves. What's 2 plus 2? 5. Count these up. What do you think 2 plus 2 is? 4, that's right. That's correction. Why do we care? So I get these long strings of code from every observation with letters that stand for teacher and student behaviors. If I go in and find all the student misbehaviors, I can ask, what did the teacher do? And there's 3 things the teacher can do. Nothing, stop command, correction. Now my question is, what's the probability of the student being on task and not being disruptive 5 minutes down the road? What we find is doing nothing and stop command is about the same in terms of predicting the future. Correction gives you a higher probability of what we want in the future. So, if you want behavior to just change now, you can do anything. But if you want it to change and stay changed, correction gives you a higher probability. Once again, however, if we calculate this out over the thousands of examples we have, we see one teacher give one corrective feedback statement to a kid every 9 schools we visit. We go to a school, we see every teacher. So this is not something that happens very often, even though it's a probability. So, bigger study. 3 behaviors that we think are really important. So I can't think of exactly how to do explicit. So what I'm going to do is, to what extent, percent of time, is the teacher we're watching addressing the kids directly? Looking at them, talking to them, showing them things, percent of time. Rate per minute of OTRs. And this is just during instruction, not the whole period we're there. And rate per minute of positive feedback. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put all 3 of those together, and we're going to create a composite score. We do something called a latent class analysis, which asks how many unique clusters of teacher are there when you think of these 3 things. Sometimes you do a latent class analysis and it'll be like there's 7 kinds of teacher in the world. This one said 3, which are essentially high, medium, and low rates of the composite of those 3 things. Now you can use that to predict. If I go and watch a classroom teacher teach for 10 minutes, when they start teaching, I only go 10 minutes. If during that 10 minutes, what I observed was a rate that's in the lowest of those 3, I will predict. If I stay here for the rest of the period, the kids I'm watching are 27% more likely than average to be off task, and a whopping 67% more likely to have disruptive behaviors. Nothing that we know of predicts kid behavior in a classroom better than adult behavior during instruction. So, probabilities. We are the probability. It's the stuff we're doing, and it's the way we do it. And I'll show you one more. This is just a correlation. If we go through all of our data and say, I just want to know what the rate of OTRs was by school, the rate of OTRs by school is significantly correlated with, negatively correlated with suspension. Higher rates of OTRs predict lower rates of suspension. Same thing for positive feedback. Schools that have higher rates of positive feedback are significantly more likely to have less suspensions. If you lump those two things together, create a composite. I'm clustering OTR and positive feedback together. Now let's go predict something for the school. What we know is OTR and positive feedback combined are predictive of the percentage of kids in the elementary school that are proficient and distinguished in both reading and math. At the secondary school, it was not statistically significant, although it was really close. So here again, we've been talking this afternoon about effective instruction. But effective instruction is more than just we're teaching. Effective instruction is setting kids up to be successful. And successful kids like to keep being successful. Engaged kids aren't as likely to have misbehaviors. So the things that we do for effective instruction have a giant impact on a lot of things that are happening. So I'm going to summarize it in 3 points. What we do is incredibly important. Having instruction out there, anybody can do, but the way we use the things we know create probabilities. And we can create bigger probabilities than anything else by thinking about instruction. Second, it is instruction that we're talking about. It's got to be explicit. It's got to be engaging. They have to have lots of chances to do with feedback, and it's got to be set up so that that feedback can legitimately be more positive than negative. That's clear. But the third part, we all know. If I'm a genius at doing effective instruction, and I go into the classroom and it's a full-on riot, mutiny, chaos going on in that classroom, that instruction's not going to work. So we also have to think about, what do I do with my ability to control where people sit and where I stand and what I say and what the routines are and how consistent we are and how I manage that whole thing. But again, you can manage kids to make them stay seated. If we aren't using effective instruction, we don't get the impact. And we can use great instruction, but if the kids are in chaos, we won't get the impact. So I think we're using effective instruction to help classroom management. And that classroom management benefit we get comes back to help instruction, and you have to have both. But today we've been talking about what does the instruction part need to look like if we're maximizing a probability for success. I'm going to ask questions. I want to point out, CIBRS.com is the website for my center. We have videos, and they are free. We have a ton of videos on OTRs and explicit instruction and feedback. We have little mini courses and micro-credentialing and all kinds of things. That's all free. So everything I've talked about today can be seen in more detail at that website. Any questions?